Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantika. Okay, let's look at the next statement here in Raghavatma Chandrika. Yesterday we heard this one. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up now. Okay, yeah, text 11. Okay, so yesterday we heard that the sadhaka who is qualified by Lobha, his relationship with scripture means his relationship with Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a repository of descriptions of the different types of relationships that one can have with Krishna. And he extended the sense of the word Shastra to include literatures by enlightened persons, Rasik Vaishnavas like Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami. They've written books that expound really in one sense, or expound the import of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Books such as Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, specifically. Having extended the meaning of Shastra to include literatures like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he begins to explain the application of Raganuga Bhakti as described by Srila Rupa Goswami in 3 verses, beginning with Krishna Smaran, Janam Chasya, etc. He says that he wants to describe or explain the import of these 3 verses according to Kamanuga Bhakti. So yesterday we did a little review on the Ragatmika Bhakti, definition of Ragatmika Bhakti, the 2 types of Ragatmika Bhakti. We defined those also. And then the 2 types of Raganuga Bhakti that follows the 2 types of Ragatmika Bhakti. So Kamanuga and Samadhanuga Bhakti. And Kamanuga Bhakti also is of 2 types we discussed yesterday. Sambhogachamai and Tata Bhavechatmika. So these 2 types, he says he wants to give the import according to these 2 types. And just for the sake of simplicity, sometimes we will refer to the Sambhogachamai as the Kantabha. Sambhogachamai is the desire to give conjugal pleasure to Krishna. And Tata Bhavechatmai Bhakti is the desire to relish the bhava of one who's giving direct relationship, conjugal pleasure to Krishna, such as Srimati Radhika. So sometimes this second one is called as Mandri Bhav, and the first one is referred to as Kanta Bhav. So sometimes I use that language because it's just a little shorter and simple to say. So yeah, we're going to hear an explanation of these 3 verses from BRS in accordance with Kamanuga Bhakti. So that's what he told, that's where we left off. Okay. So let's read it. Let's read here and then we'll try to give some explanation along the way. So in the first Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu verse quoted in text 10, the phrase Krishnam Smarana, meaning remembering Shri Krishna, indicates that the limb of Smarana or remembrance is prominent in the path of Raganuga, as Raga is a function of the mind. Preshnam, meaning most beloved, indicates Shri Krishna, the beloved Lord of Vrindavana, who enjoys pastimes in a form corresponding to one's desire. So we're hearing here clearly that Smarana is the critical anga in Raganuga Bhakti, along with Kirtan. So if you also go and see the Upadeshamrita, text 8, which is a description of Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, basically. So in that verse also we hear about the need to engage the mind and the tongue. So these 2 angas of Bhakti, Kirtan and Smarana are the most important angas in Raganuga Bhakti. He says the word Preshna, which means dear, refers to Krishna, who's the beloved Lord of Vrindavan, and who enjoys pastimes in a form corresponding to one's desire. So the form of Krishna that one experiences is the one that is congruent with the bhava that they have. Yadiyata urugaya vibhavayanti tata vapu pranasya saranugrahaya. So this verse that I always like quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam speaks of Yadya according to your meditation and sadhana bhakti. Then tat vapu, that form will manifest according to your meditation to show mercy to you in reciprocation with the nature of your meditation, the nature of your desire for love. So there's a very remarkable quality of Krishna that the forms that he manifests is in perfect congruence with the nature of the love. And therefore Krishna is able to provide a perfect reciprocity with that love, which is often the pinching point in the mundane relationships, if you've observed. In friendships and romantic relationships, in all the relationships, there cannot be perfect reciprocity with the desires of the soul. They cannot be perfectly responsive to that because of our limitation. We cannot even see our, the love of those who love us. They cannot see our love also. We cannot even see the soul. We can't see anything, actually. At best, we have to intuit it, and then we have to respond according to our intuitions, which may be off also. And that way, relationships in the material world are often dissatisfying. Even if you like the person and you like the relationship also, but they end up being pinpricks all over the place because of not being able to perfectly reciprocate with the nature of the love in real time. Sometimes after your intuitions have failed, then you finally have to go and humble yourself and ask, like, what's wrong, baby? Like, come on, what's going on? And then they explain it to you, and then you have to like adjust yourself. But it becomes a little bit frustrating when the reciprocity isn't in real time. And so in this way, relationships are always unsatisfying in the material world. But Krishna can respond in real time to the love, the dynamic of loving desires that are manifesting. And so, and so he's the perfect Vishaya, the perfect object of love. Okay, so this is the form. So Krishna Smarana means remembering that Krishna, who is perfectly congruent, so to speak, with the love that you have, with the love that you're aspiring for. And this also indicates that the anga of Smarana is most critical in Raganuga Bhakti. We'll not describe it so much here, but later, not later in this work, but maybe at some other future point where we study something else. Smarana itself has 5 divisions: Smarana, Dhyana, Dharana, Anusmriti, and Samadhi. So these are 5 aspects of Smarana. And it's kind of beyond the scope of this thing. But needless to say, the extent of Smarana is Samadhi, a total like absorption in that reality. So Smarana really, and the real importance of Smarana is really Samadhi. And so one should come in that state of Samadhi, of one's beloved Krishna. Okay, next little thing here. The word Janam Chasya refer to Sri Krishna's nearest and dearest. Who are they? To answer this question, the adjective Nijasamihitam is used, indicating those associates who possess the mood for which one is aspiring, like Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radhika, Lalita, Vishaka, Rupa Manjari, and so on. The practicing devotees who eagerly hanker for the brilliant, lustrous, pure mood of sweet Paramore love, Ujjvala Bhava, possess an extraordinary, profound determination, Nishta, for the Ujjvala Bhava of Sri Krishna's associates, namely Sri Radha and the other Braj maidens, which is greater than their Nishta for the desired object, Sri Krishna himself. Hence, such devotees deeply hanker for this mood of his associates. So the word Janam Chasya means those who are dear to Krishna, but it is qualified by saying Nijasamihitam, which means that the associates because Krishna has many associates that are dear to him. So those associates whose bhava you seek to embody, those associates, you should also remember them. Now he's given here the examples of some associates, such as Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radhika, Lalita Vishaka, and Rupa Manjari. So, and then all the commentaries I saw on this statement, they emphasize the Manjari Bhava. And interestingly, for me at least, the Kanta Bhava is like kind of criticized. Because the Kanta Bhava means the desire to give direct conjugal pleasure to Krishna. So somehow in the commentaries that I saw at least, there was like a subtle, almost criticism of the Kanta Bhava, insofar as it was presented as if one has a desire for Kanta Bhava, then that desire is kind of linked to the desire to please Krishna directly without going through his devotees or something in that sense. And therefore it was almost like as if it was equated to a mundane tendency. But Srila Rupa Goswami has clearly said that Kamanuga Bhakti is of two types. One is the Kanta Bhava and the other is the Manjari Bhava. There are two types are there. And both are valid. It is not that the Sambhogachamai one is less valid or less pure than the Manjari Bhava. Yeah, in the commentaries that I read, that doesn't mean that the authors intended it in this way, but I can see how it could be read as the desire for Kanta Bhava is less pure than Manjari Bhava. But we have to remember that this is all different types of Uttam Bhakti, right? So Sadhana is Uttam Bhakti also, and Raganuga Bhakti is Uttam Bhakti also, and the Kamanuga form is also Uttam Bhakti, and both types of Kamanuga Bhakti are also Uttam Bhakti. So it's not that it's less pure. The Manjari Bhava, of course, is understood to be the most ecstatic, by various logic that you'll come to discover in your own time as you become interested in these subject matters. But that doesn't mean that, yes, the Manjari Bhava may be the most ecstatic form of the conjugal rasa, as the conjugal rasa is more ecstatic in a sense than the other rasas. That doesn't make the other rasas less pure or mundane. Also, we have to remember that Kamarupa Ragatmika Bhakti is itself characterized by the desire for giving conjugal pleasure to Krishna. The definition that we heard yesterday was Sakamarupa Sambhoga Trishna Ya Nayati Swatam, right? That form of Ragatmika Bhakti known as Kamarupa, taking the actions of Kama, is characterized by Sambhoga Trishna, the thirst for giving conjugal union to Krishna. And the Manjari Bhava is itself, you can say, only meaningful in the context of that aspect. So why this Sambhogachamai desire is downplayed so much, I'm just going to suggest it here. I think it has something related to do with this sort of some scars that we've inherited around, eroticism and sex life in general. Of course, in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a Bhakti Vedanta literature. So the Vedanta part is like renunciation, right? So that's why you get a lot of the renounced messages in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the Bhakti part is like the rasa stuff. So Bhakti Vedanta is a combination of both of these, realities, you can say. And the Vedanta part is real heavy on the sex life stuff for obvious reasons, because sex life is the most infatuating of all desires. And if it relates to the gross physical body, it becomes the main linchpin tying us to samsara. So Bhagavatam will be very heavy about that. But somehow that understanding is superimposed onto the transcendental amative rasa of the spiritual world. And therefore, it's like an aversion is there to it. And the only form of Kamanuga that's considered acceptable is the Manjari Bhava, because in Manjari Bhava, if you come to discover this later on, according to the development of your own greed, And Manjari Baba, they resist Krishna's advances. So even we hear from Chaitanya Charitamrita that Srimati Radhika derives 10 million times the pleasure of arranging for her sakis to give pleasure to Krishna, than even from herself giving pleasure to Krishna. This is told in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. As a little bit of a sidebar, book distributors love to mention this point in the context of book distribution, which is the ghetto, because they'll say that, by going out and distributing books, arranging for others to contact Krishna consciousness, then one derives 10 million times the pleasure of oneself enjoying with Krishna. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever distributed books successfully. And certainly there's a certain happiness of someone taking a book. But if that happiness is 10 million times the pleasure of actually meeting Krishna, then it can hardly be thought of meeting Krishna as a very wonderful affair. And of course, I'm saying this statement of mine actually comes from Andrew Guru's book. He was very critical of, not critical so much. He had a critique like this, which I thought was a valid one. You do experience happiness to see someone take the book and come into Krishna consciousness. But if that happiness is 10 million times the pleasure of actually meeting Krishna face to face, then we could hardly be meeting Krishna as that wonderful of an affair. Okay, so in any case, in CC, that's not Radharani meets Krishna, it's ecstatic. And when she arranges for other sakis to meet Krishna, it's all the more so, according to the statement of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Still, the Manjaris will resist Krishna's advances. So I think the combination of the negative imprints that we have around like the erotic, basically, not only just in terms of like growing up in a pornified world, but also in the religious context, sex life is generally viewed negatively. Religious or Vedantic context is viewed negatively. And combine that with the sort of preeminence of the renounced culture, especially in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. All of our archetypes of devotion in Gaura Lila, the main ones are all renunciates. The ones that are esteemed, at least in Chaitanya Charitamrita, are like Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Swarup Damodar Goswami, Kaviraj Goswami, and so on. There's Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy was a householder, but we don't hear anything about his household life. Like nada, zero, nothing. So I think the combination of the negative samskaras that we've, inherited around the erotic, combined with the renounced culture, tends to downplay the viability of the Kanta Bhav in relationship to Krishna and present it as some sort of mundane thing. Whereas the Manjari Bhava is acceptable because you resist that in deference to just arranging for your Swamini, Srimati Radhika, to give pleasure to Krishna. So all the commentaries are explaining in terms of Manjari Bhava, but I'm pushing back against that, honestly, because for years and years and years, I've wondered about this. And as I was studying this yesterday specifically, and I was curious about this, so I was doing a little bit of research. And so anyway, some of the ideas of what I discovered are being shared right now in this particular class. The point here I wanted to make is that the Janam Chasya, the dear ones that one should select, are the ones that follow your Ruchi. And Ruchi cannot be mandated. That is the whole point of calling the Raganuga path as spontaneous, as I mentioned yesterday. It's spontaneous because Ruchi cannot be regular. You cannot instruct someone to have taste for something. They got taste for it, or they don't have taste. As simple as that. You cannot instruct them to have taste for it. Just like I say, have taste for the holy names. Okay. It's not possible. Just like they were doing these japa retreats, I think they must still be doing. But for a period in the second decade of the 2000s, the 21st century, a lot of devotees were doing the japa retreats. So the japa retreats, they would say things like this: now chant with taste. I was like, what you think that, wait, where's the on switch? Okay, let me just turn on the on switch really quick. There it is. Now I'm gonna chant with taste. You can't just chant with taste. That's not possible. You have to develop yourself. So in the same way that you can't chant with taste, you can't be instructed to have taste in something. You either have taste in it or you don't. So the attraction to Krishna consciousness, particularly when we say Krishna consciousness here, we mean the Braja Lila. The attraction cannot be mandated. Some people will be attracted to the Madhurya rasas, some to other rasas. And even within the Madhurya rasas, someone may be attracted to Kanta bhav. And you have to follow your ruchi. Otherwise, you will be the loser. There's a nice statement that I like from Joseph Campbell. It's a little rubric he uses. Follow your bliss. So I'm saying the same thing here in terms of ruchi. The consequence of denying one's ruchi is, well, in the worst case, it's falling away from Krishna consciousness. And in the best case, it's feeling apathetic to Krishna consciousness. In other words, you get a little bit of taste, and then people around you start criticizing it, or you hear criticism for it, or just there's a general culture around the negativity, a general culture of negativity around something that you actually have ruchi for, let's say in Krishna consciousness. Then if you allow that to enter your soul, so to speak, then you'll just become apathetic, like a body, like an empty shell, going through the movements of sadhana bhakti, but no heart. Or else you may fall away from Krishna consciousness, because if you have no ruchi, then it's only a matter of time before you go away. That's just the way that's the way that works, actually. So I wanted to say this thing here, that follow your bliss, follow your ruchi. So your ruchi, okay, he's explaining in terms of Kamanuga Bhakti, but it can be applied across the board for all the relationships with Krishna. And within Kamanuga Bhakti, there may also be attraction to the Kanta bhav. That is not a material desire. Okay, it may be in our particular special case because of being low class or whatever. But if that's a material desire, then the desire for dasa rasa is also a material desire. It is no less a material desire just because you call it as dasa rasa. So all the relationships are based on service to Krishna. So one has to choose the associates that are congruent with your taste. In one sense, this is the meaning of Swajatiya Sangha also. We know this verse from the Angas of Bhakti section, Srimad Bhagavatam Arthanam. Aswado rasakisaha swajatiyashayesh nigde sadho sangha swatovare. You know this shloka. It means the meanings of Srimad Bhagavatam should be tasted from the Rasika Vaishnavas. And which Rasikas? There's so many Rasikas there. So what's Swajatiya? That's what it says there, Swajati. They like-minded. Like-minded means having the same ruchi. Albeit their ruchi will be matured and advanced, therefore they can inspire you and instruct you. But having the same ruchi, Swajati Ashesh Nigde, Sadho Sangha Swatovare, that will become the most important Sangha for us. And that Sangha, that means having the same ruchi, means a Rasik Vaishnav in real time that can instruct us and inspire us. And it also means the Nitya Siddhas, whose bhava that we are attracted to, that is also Swajati, in the same family. By hearing about them, you are also doing sadhu sangha with them. And that way you become increasingly enlightened about your own ruchi, and it can be developed in this way. So this is the meaning of Janam Chasya. That's how you have to select. And that cannot be mandated. And that's what I wanted to say. And I'm saying this in light of reading the commentaries to this, and you can see for yourself. You all have already downloaded this particular commentary. Maybe you've already read ahead. But go and read the commentary. It is a very nice commentary. But you can read it. You can see how there seems to be I don't want to use the word aversion, but equating of the Kanta bhav with like the mundane desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. And I guess I'm kind of pushing back against that, honestly. So Am I wrong? Maybe. So you might have to do a little bit further investigation. I don't think I am wrong though here. I just wanted to pull it out because Sri Rupa Goswami has clearly said that these are the two types of Kamanuga Bhakti. So they're both valid. Okay. The other point here is that the nishta to attain that bhava is stronger than the nishta to attain Krishna. So the interesting point about Gaudiya Vaishnavism in general is that the goal of Krishna consciousness is always told to be Krishna prema, right? We never say the goal of Krishna consciousness is Krishna, which is a little bit interesting. Obviously, if you have Krishna prema, then you attract Krishna because the saying goes, we all become fools in the hands of love. And in a sense, Krishna's personality as dear Lalita, you can say the transcendental Cupid or Playboy, he is controlled by love. That is one of the qualities of the Dhira Lalit Nayaka. And so he's controlled by prema. So if you have prema, you can attract and control Krishna. Still, the goal is not Krishna, the goal is Krishna prema. So the nishta to attain that bhava is stronger than the nishta to obtain even Krishna himself. So this is just it's an interesting point that Sri Vishwanath's bringing up here. Our steadiness, our ardent avidity is for attaining bhav, right? That is, and then we'll get Krishna. So it's just interesting. I guess this might be contrasted against Vaidhi sadhakas, who may be more zoomed in on Krishna directly, like we have to attain Krishna. But more sacred in many ways for these sadhakas is that bhava for Krishna, and not even Krishna himself. Interesting point. Okay, so describing the last part of the first verse, he says here, Kurya vasam brajesada means that one should always reside in Braja. The implication is that if this is physically impossible, one should dwell there mentally. However, the next verse, quoted from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So what is the next verse? Seva satakarupena siddharupena chaturahita bhavalipsuna karya. Braja loka anusarata. So the next verse clearly explains that the sadhaka should take up residence in Braja physically. How does it clearly? Because it says Braja loka anusarata. So you should follow, anusarata means follow, the Braj Lok and Gaur Lila and Krishna Lila, as we described yesterday. So all the Braja Lok live in Braja, right? They don't live elsewhere. So that's what he says. Therefore, to live there physically is clearly indicated, not only in the first verse, Kurya Vasam Brajesada, but also in the second verse, by saying, follow the Braja Loka. They all live in Braj. So living in Braja physically is kind of really important for this sadhana. Of course, it is said you can live there mentally, but how you will do that? It's very difficult without living there practically. In any case, I pulled up a couple of verses that were also mentioned in the commentaries, which were very nice. This verse particularly was so nice. Nachanyatra shetre hari tanu sanato pisujanat. Hold on, I think you can see it. I'm just making it bigger. This is the second verse. This is from Raghunath Das Goswami Stavavali. Rasa swadam premna dadadapi vasami kshanamapi. So this verse is saying, Nacha anyatra shetre, that the devote, Raghunath Das Goswami is praying. He says he does not have a desire to live in other places, other holy places. Haritanu sunata api. Even they have the form of the Lord is there. Haritanu. Haritanu means the form of Hari. The deity form is there. And the Sujanat, Rasa Swadham Premna. The Sujanat here refers to the pure devotees. They're giving very nice Prem Kata about that form of the Lord in other holy places. But he says here, I don't desire to live in that place. Even Hari's form is there. Even these great Vaishnavas are there giving very nice Prem Katas going on. Even for a moment. I don't desire to live there even for a moment. Oh, what you desire then? So he's saying here, Samadvaita Gramya Balibhit Rabhi Tanban Apikatam, Vidase Samvasam, Braja Bhuvana Eva Pratibhama. My desire is to stay in Braja and live amongst the villagers who are doing village talk. They're doing village prattle, because if you live in a village, that's what goes on. I promise you, I was in Vrindavan for only a week and a half, and I was getting all the gossip. And I was only there for a few days, and I was getting all the gossip because it's a village. It's a very small place. So I was hearing about this one, the other one. I hadn't been there in a few years, so I was getting caught up on all the, as we say, on all the tea. All of it was coming. That is natural. And you live in a small space, it's very natural that the village prattle goes on. It's called Gramya Katha. So Raghunath Das Goswami, he's expressing this strong Braj Vas mood here, living in Braj. He said, I would rather live amongst those people, the villagers of Braj who are doing this village prattle. I would rather stay with them than to go to some other holy place where Lord Hari's form is there, and nice Prem Kathas going on from Rasik Vaishnava also is speaking. But he is outside of Braja. I prefer to stay in Braja. That is my desire. I'll read the translation here, very nice. I vow that I shall live in the land of Braja, birth after birth. Actually, I don't like this translation. I'm going to read the translation from the commentary of Srila Narayan Maharaj here. It's so nice. The translation is so nice. Where is it at? Yeah. No, not that one. This one. Yeah. Even if it's some other holy place, I think you can see this. The deity of Sri Krishna is present, and the fortunate opportunity is available to relish with great love narrations and connection with the Lord, flowing from the mouths of elevated devotees. I have no desire to live in such a place. Even for a moment, I prefer to live in the land of Braja, and the association of the villagers engaged in chatting casually there. I will live in Braja birth after birth. So nice. Anyway, explaining this mood of Brajvas. So if you can't do this physically, all right, whatever. So you can do it mentally. But as we, Agape was reminding us, Hari Prasad was saying, at least we should have the dream to stay there. Just like Indians, they have the American dream. And when you tell them you're from America, which is not recommended, by the way, when you go to India, they say, Prabhu, where are you from? Tell them Africa or some other place. Don't say America, though. If you say Africa, you'll be safe. If you say America, they will try to make friends with you. Then you go back to America, they will say, Prabhuji, I can do this seva, that seva, make arrangement for me to get visa. So why are they having American dream in their head? So at least we should have the Braja dream in our head if we're not living there. So that's an inspiring point. But otherwise, Brajvasa is very important. So Kuryavasam Braje Sada, one should always live in Braj. That is the first instruction. Okay, second verse is explained now by Sri Vishwanath. Sadhaka Rupena indicates the present gross body of the practicing devotee. And Siddha Rupena refers to the internally contemplated body suitable for the direct service of Sri Krishna. Tadbhava Lipsuna means that being eager to attain the sweet Paramore love that is enjoyed by the beloved Sri Krishna, and which is ever present in one's favorite Brajvasis, namely Krishna's darling, Srimati Radhika, and other gopis. One should earnestly serve them with love. How is this service to be performed? By collecting all the required paraphernalia, by mind or by body. One should engage in loving service to them. And in what mood is this service to be executed? The answer to this is Braja Lokanusarata, by emulating the service attitude of the Brijvasis. That is, in his physical body, the practicing devotee should follow the example of Sri Rupa Goswami and other like-minded Brajvasis, and in his perfected spiritual body, Siddhadeha, should perform service adopting the method of Sri Rupa Manjari and the other maidservants of Braja. Here, another definition of Braja Lokanusarata is given. One should understand this phrase to refer to those who have established a relationship with Brajendra Nandana Shri Krishna due to performing sadhana in their previous lives. Examples of this are Chandrakanti and other Sakis, the famous sages of Dandakaranya, as described in the Padma Purana, and the Shrutis, as mentioned in Brihad Vamana Purana. One should follow these Brajavasis, that is, by observing their practices, one should render service as they do. In this way, the first two verses quoted from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu describe the subject matters of Smarana and Brajavas, residing in Braj. The third verse discusses hearing and other limbs of sadhana. So now it's going to describe the third verse. So the second verse, Seva Sadhakarupena Siddharupena Chatri. So we already heard yesterday a little bit. The Sadhakarupena means the gross physical body, gross psychophysical body that we're presently trapped in. So we should render service in the Sadhakarupa. Braja Loka, following the Braja Loka like Srila Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, etc. So how did they live? So in the commentaries, a nice little passage is quoted from CC. I'm just going to read this passage, it's a short passage, describing how Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana, how they were living there. So it says here, okay. So I'm going to start here. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami were the objects of love and honor for all the great stalwart devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If someone returned to his country after seeing Vrindavan, the associates of the Lord would ask him questions. They would ask those returning from Vrindavan, how are Rupa and Sanatana doing in Vrindavan? What are their activities in the renounced order? How do they manage to eat? These were the questions asked. The Lord's associates would also ask, how is it that Rupa and Sanatana are engaging in devotional service 24 hours daily? At that time, the person who had returned from Vrindavan would praise Srila Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. The brothers actually had no fixed residence. They reside beneath trees, one night under one tree and the next night under another. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami beg a little food from the houses of Brahmanas. Giving up all kinds of material enjoyment, they take only some dry bread and fried chickpeas. They carry only water pots and they wear torn quilts. They always chant the holy names of Krishna and discuss his pastimes. In great jubilation, they also dance. They engage almost 24 hours daily in rendering service to the Lord. They usually sleep only an hour and a half. And some days, when they continuously chant the Lord's holy name, they do not sleep at all. Sometimes they write transcendental literatures about devotional service, and sometimes they hear about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and spend their time thinking about the Lord. And then when the personal associates of Mahaprabhu would hear of the activities of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis, they would say, what is wonderful for a person who has been granted the Lord's mercy. So obviously their life is characterized by a lot of absorption and a lot of renunciation. So I don't know exactly what they're intending for all the rest of the Raganuga Sadakas. If we are to follow that, it may be a little difficult for us. As Ram Roy Prabhu says here in New York, he says, if you try to imitate the 6 Goswamis, you'll become a sick Goswami. So I do find this part of the practice curious because if we are to look to Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis as archetypes for how to conduct our life as sadhakas, then it seems that we are in great difficulty. And I've often wondered, and so far I've not yet to find a meaningful answer, are there other archetypes and, sadhana lila or Gaur lila that can also be considered exemplary to emulate that don't have that level of renunciation? And again, like I said in the CC, all these stalwart sadhakas, they're all the ones that are esteemed at least, and whose lives are spoken of with greater detail are all renunciates. And although the vast majority of Mahaprabhu's followers are householders, there is no in-depth description of how they lived and existed, which could be very useful for our own sadhana bhakti, given many of us are not going to become renunciates. Anyway, that's just food for thought that I'm throwing on the table, which is very interesting. The other point is that we are to render seva following the Braja Loka and Krishna Lila in our Siddha Rupa. So this is where all the controversy and the Gaudiya Sanghas come. What is meant by this Siddha Rupa, or sometimes referred to as Siddha Deha, but the language used by Rupa Goswami specifically is Siddha Rupa. So the Siddha Rupa is a mentally contemplated form useful for service in Krishna's Leela. So explain it in terms of the Kamanuga Bhakti, it's a form of a gopi, a mentally conceived form of a gopi. Now, is this mentally conceived form of a gopi given, or is it manifested within the psyche at a certain stage of development? And this is where all the controversy comes up in trying to answer this one question. We obviously don't have time to explore it or settle it in this short little overview of this book. But basically, as we've mentioned in some of the earlier classes in this book, in the Siddha Pranali system, it appears that basically the guru gives a template. The template that you are to follow. So you are such and such mandri. This is your form, which includes like the color. This is your dress. This is where you live. This is your seva. This is your order. This is your husband. This is your village. This is your sambandha, relationship with Krishna. And even it seems that in these traditions, they would actually write it down on a piece of paper, all the different aspects. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur received that. And there's an autobiography, not autobiography, it's a biography based on his autobiography called Modern Encounter with Hinduism. Is that it? Encounter? I forget the name, Encounter. I think it's called Modern Encounter with Him. Anyway, it's a biography of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and they show his Diksha Patra, like this list is there given of all these different aspects. And it's basically like a template that you use conceiving of yourself, almost like active imagination, a term coined by Carl Jung. And you use it to participate in Krishna Lila, to render service. They call it as Manasi Seva, to render service within your mind with this contemplation of yourself as a gopi with all these different aspects. And so Seva should be rendered in that way also within your mind. Again, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took issue with this for many viable reasons, some of which we explored in the earlier sessions. But the general trend of followers of Saraswati Thakur, the general trend in terms of explaining this is that the Siddha Rupa is something that begins to manifest in the psyche once you've attained higher levels of bhakti, such as asakti, which means attachment to Krishna. If you remember in the Madhurya Kandabini, he says in asakti, the mirror of the psyche, chitta, becomes so clinging or clear that a reflection of Krishna can appear there. So the idea here is that just as a reflection of Krishna can appear there. So a manifestation of one's Siddha Deha will manifest in such a purified psyche. And only on that stage are you really qualified to apply the practices of Manasi Seva, which Raganuga Bhakti is called for. Anyway, this is just a short, that issue as itself is a very elaborate historical sort of conundrum that are enigma that could be explored in greater depth. I'm just saying in summary what it is. But yeah, a lot of the ways in which Krishna consciousness developed or has shifted is based on an understanding of that one phrase, Siddha Rupena Chaturhi, what is meant by that. So it is a little bit of mysterious knowledge is there. In any case, this is the meaning of rendering service in the Sadhaka Rupa and the Siddha Rupa. Sri Vishwanath says we can also follow the Brajaloka. The Brajaloka can also refer to people like the sages of Dandakaranya forest, a story mentioned in Padma Purana. Apparently, these sages, they were worshiping Krishna, chanting Gopal mantra in order to attain Kantaba. Their desire was not met, and then Ramchandra appeared to them And he gave them blessings that they could attain the Kanta Bhav after Krishna comes and manifests his Leela. Very interesting. So in one sense, this may be the way that we celebrate the other avatars, the way we celebrate the other avatars' appearance days in this world. Just as they got blessings from Ramchandra to obtain Kanta Bhav. So we also celebrate the other avatars so we can attain our Bhava. Remember, the Nishta for the Bhava is more than Nishta for attaining Krishna. So you can maybe do like this. In any case, they performed so many austerities and later on they got it. This is also true of the Upanishads. There's some stories there in another Purana. So he says, following the Braja Loka can refer to these entities also. They didn't live in Braja, but they became Siddhas, Sadhan Siddhas, and Vrindavan. So it can also refer to them. But for our purposes, it is better to follow the Braja Loka like Rupa Goswami and Gaur Leela and Rupa Manjari and Krishna Leela. So that is his summary of that verse. And then he concludes the last verse. We're going to read it and we'll hear more about it tomorrow. So he says here, Shravano Kirtanadini. One should follow Shravanam, Kirtana, and the other limbs of Bhakti, meaning all the 64 limbs, beginning with accepting shelter at the lotus feet of a spiritual master. Apart from this practice of hearing, chanting, and so on, which is aimed at emulating the mood of the Brijbasis, no other sadhana is capable of bestowing the desired fruit. To emphasize this point, the word manishibihi is used here. This means that intelligent persons will use their power of discrimination to follow the limbs of bhakti that are favorable to their mood. It is essential to avoid following anything unfavorable or that which can hinder the appearance of bhav, the first rays of the sun of divine love. So we'll hear more elaboration on this in the next little paragraph. But we are to follow the important angas of bhakti. So the important angas of bhakti means the first 20 and the last 5. So we are mandated basically to follow those. And out of the 64 angas, we also follow those, but they should not be unfavorable to our cultivation of bhav. So we have to follow with discernment, manishibihi. Now, what is this discernment will be a little bit described afterwards. A little bit later, he will describe what is meant by this discernment. But so we'll pause there and see if anyone wants to say anything. So Mukunda's quite a comparison. Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Yeah, Pundarik Vidyanidhi is there. Ramananda Roy is there. But they don't give much information about their lives as grihastas. Of course, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, we hear a little bit that he was living what appeared to be like a materialistic person. But they don't tell us about his life of bhajan so much. Like he woke up at this time and he did this sort of thing. And we don't get that sort of detailed information. We get a lot more detailed information about the way the renunciates lived. And so as a culture, we kind of inherit that renounced bent to our understanding of what a proper Vaishnava is. We give lip service to the idea that you can be a grihasta, be a proper Vaishnava. But in our actual culture, grihastas are very much downplayed. Like even think about it in your own mind, just not overthinking it, just like viscerally what comes up for you. When you think about a grihasta guru versus a sannyas guru, which one is more exalted in your mind? Just viscerally, not theoretically, not abstractly, just viscerally. That's the culture. That just goes to show you how the culture has impacted our understanding of who is like a deep and advanced Vaishnava. So, and again, if all the archetypes that we hear about are these exalted renunciates, then it naturally will follow that our understanding of advanced devotion should look exactly like that. Otherwise, it's not advanced. But Ramananda Roy was a householder, and Pundarik Vidyanidhi was a householder. Most of Mahaprabhu's followers are householders, but we don't hear much about their lives. So those archetypes are lost on us. And therefore, the idea that we are to render service in our Sadhaka Rupa, following the Braja Lokas, such as Rupa Goswami or Sanatana Goswami, I think it presents as much a dilemma for us as following the Braja Loka and Krishna Lila in our minds. Both are quite a dilemma for us. So I'm kind of interested about this on a personal level also. I'm attracted to the idea of treading the rock mark, even though I'm not qualified. And if I have to if I have to use Rupa Goswami's existence as a template for my life as a sadhaka, that's going to be hard. I definitely need more than an hour and a half of sleep. I'm not going to be surviving on fried chickpeas and yogurt. Absolutely not. I that's a problem for me. So I kind of need another archetype that's considered viable, and we don't really discuss that. Aside from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whose life as a grihasta was just like also extraordinary, honestly. But even though he's presented as an exalted archetype in one sense to be followed, just as far as a culture we've inherited, it's not really the case. So anyway, it's something just interesting to be explored. There's other groups of Braj Bhaktas in Vrindavan, Hari Vangsha. They're called as the Radhavallabhis. So this sort of tradition was started by one saint who was also living in the time of the Goswamis, Sri Hari Vangsha. So there he was a grihasta, actually. Apparently he had a wife, and he left her to go just live in Braj as a renunciate. And then Srimati Radhika told him to get married twice. So he had two wives. And apparently in their line, for the most part, a lot of their acharyas have all been grihastas. I think one of their present acharyas now, who is very popular, even on YouTube, I don't know who does his videos, but he's like very popular. He's a renunciate. But a lot of their acharyas are grihastas, at least throughout the centuries. And so, yeah, I've just been kind of curious about that, having more archetypes to follow in Brajaloka, in Braj that aren't just like renunciates to the nth degree, which makes it a little bit challenging to emulate anyway. So, okay, anyone wants to ask anything or should I reflect anything on this? Okay.
I had a quick question, kind of.
Yes.
So obviously, it's one thing for someone who's actually practicing Raganuga sadhana bhakti to kind of pick and choose their association. But I feel like even taking a step back amongst all of us Vaidhi Bhaktas, you can still kind of differentiate between Vaidhi Bhaktas who are aspiring or open to Raganuga Bhakti versus Vaidhi Bhaktas who don't even have it on the radar. And so I'm wondering if there should be some type of differentiation of association there, even though, we're all in the same camp kind of, but we're kind of moving in different directions.
Yeah, absolutely. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
The answer is always going to be yes. The hard part is having the courage to pursue that yes.
Yeah.
Because to pursue the yes, the implication of pursuing the yes is having certain relationships less. I always say like that, to follow your bliss, there's an implication in that also. You have to leave behind the starting point, the familiar world, in order to, just like in the Avatar, I'm sorry to give this really mundane example, but I love the Avatar The Last Airbender. I absolutely love that show. So in order for him to become the Avatar, he has to embrace his path, he has to leave the starting point. In his case, the air temple and all that. Of course, he ended up leaving the air temple to run away from his destiny, but then he was forced to actually go on his destiny because of the circumstances in the show. So like, I'm gonna give you that example of Mukunda because he can resonate with that. So anyway, there's always an implication in following your bliss, right? Krishna calls the gopis into the forest. And what is the implication of following that bliss? They have to abandon their children, their husbands, their in-laws, their modesty, their morals, their dharma. They have to leave all of that behind to pursue Krishna. So also it is with the case with association. So that's always a little awkward sort of thing, at least awkward in our heart. I often pray that Krishna will just make the arrangement in such a way that it doesn't hurt that much. Just like, we just kind of like shift in different directions in a very natural way, and it just is what it is. Otherwise, it's like they keep calling you like, hey man, I noticed you don't come to any of my programs anymore. You don't answer my calls, you don't answer my texts. It's something wrong. And you got to like lie to them. Like, no, everything's all right. I've just been really busy. But actually, you're like choosing your association carefully because somehow you've gotten the greed to really like pursue the goal of your life. But how do you explain that to someone without being hurtful or without coming off as totally arrogant? Oh, so now you think you that, and then it gets weird. Good luck. Okay, so we'll stop here. I hope everything was clear.
Hare Krishna.
Oh,
yeah, I was just thinking. So, as you mentioned, that Rupa Goswami has mentioned 64 limbs, but like this particular devotee, like he will choose which one of them to follow. Like if someone is not, what you are saying that is not favorable to his mood, then he will not follow. So I was just wondering that Rupa Goswami has given 64 and the devotee has to be careful. So how much more careful one has to be, like regarding the things which are given in the Vedas? Like sometimes we see that, we are doing this, this is Vedic, or we are doing that, that is also Vedic, it is given in the Vedas. But in that section, like person has to be like so much more careful, because in this case, Rupa Goswami has already given, but still a person is careful which one to follow or not to follow. And the Vedas have given so many things.
yes.
So how much more?
Very nice comment. Krishna says in the Gita, Yadate Mohakalilam Budir Yatatharishati. What's the next line? Help me out. Tada
Gantasi Nirvedam.
Gantasi Nirveda. Last line?
Srotavyasya Srutasya Cha.
Shrotavyasya Shrutasya Cha. Yes. You learn this verse, huh? I always quote this verse though. This is a very good verse. So Yadate Mohakalilam, when the mind, buddhi, or the buddhi vyatatarishati, when the buddhi has crossed beyond the Mohakalilam, the Prabhupada translation of the forest of delusion. So what is the forest of delusion in the context? There's all the Shastric vidis in the Vedas. So you have Lobha, and so now the intelligence is actually crossed beyond that. Then at that time, you will become nirveda, callous to what has been heard or what will be heard in the future, dealing with those literatures. So there's no question really being careful with it, because for one who has Lobha, their heart has really become nirveda to that, callous. And now they say, okay, let me follow bhakti. And I have to follow these things, but then they have to be discerning when following. So yes, that's a good comment though.
Okay. Then the follow-up would be that in the beginning of the book, I was just reading the book. So it mentions about what was happening at that time, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So it says that there was one group who are not following the Vedanta, and they were just saying that we will just want to follow Raganuga Bhakti, and they were discarding the, you can say, the Shastras or the Vedantic theism. Right, so how to understand?
So I think we're going to hear about this a little bit tomorrow. But there's this verse there, Shruti Shmiti Puranani Pantaratra Vidam Vina Akanti Kihare Bhaktir Utpatti Yavakalpate. That those who Shruti Shmiti Puranani Pantaratra Vidam Vina, without following the scriptures, like the Shrutis and the Smritis and the Pancharatra, etc., then one so-called pure devotion, Akantiki Bhakti, is a disturbance of the society, right? This verse will be quoted in the next passage. And the idea of this verse, I think we'll hear from Sri Vishwanath tomorrow, is that these people reject the Shastravathi because they lack respect for it, and not because they have adhikar that transcends those edicts that are mentioned therein. Whereas the sadhaka who has lobha, he may also not be following, but not because he lacks respect for Shastravidhi, but because his adhikar permits him to go beyond that. Just like in the Gita, Krishna is speaking about dharma in so many places, but then at the end of the Gita, he says, sarva dharma parityagya, that give up all the dharmas. And if you give up all of the dharmas because of that instruction, then there is no sin in doing so, because you've embraced a higher injunction, so to speak, or instruction that trumps the lower instruction. But these people, they have disregard or lack of respect for Shastra Vidhi, and they also do not have proper adhikar. So then the disrespect amounts to basically an offense, and their so-called pure devotion becomes a disturbance to the society. So I believe he's going to make explanation like this. That is coming up tomorrow. We'll hear a little bit of explanation like this.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
I think this is also Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's, why he was peeved with what he was saying in the Gaudiya community in his time. People speaking like this, no need for Shastra Vidhi, whatever. But then looking at their adhikar very low. And so it basically amounts to niyamagraha, which Rupa Goswami says can destroy bhakti. Shabir bhakti vinashati, right? So niyamagraha is one of those things that can actually destroy. Destroy the bhakti means cover it. So that is like the critique there. So we'll see. I think we'll see here tomorrow this thing. So I'll be able to answer it more precisely. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Message of the day. Follow your ruchi. If you spend your life denying it, you'll be the loser. Promise you that. Okay. I'll see you all tomorrow. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur ki jai. Shri Raghav Chandrika ki jai. Go Kripanandi. Hari Hari Bol.